UNICEF has congratulated South Africa for the progress made in advancing child rights as reflected by the Committee on the Rights of the Child's CRC. Concluding observations following the submission of South Africa's latest periodic child rights report. The report states that South Africa continues to lead by example through its commitment to the passing of institutional and policy measures related to the realization of child rights. The committee also noted as examples are the Child Justice Amendment Act 2019, the Children's Amendment Act 2022 and the National Child Care and Protection Policy 2019, among others. UNICEF says the adoption of the policy for the provision of quality education and support for children with severe intellectual disabilities is also a vital step forward in enabling every child to reach their full potential. For more on this, we are now joined via Zoom by UNICEF South Africa's Chief of Communications, Toby. Toby, thank you so much for joining us this evening. Perhaps maybe give us an insight there and just tell us about the importance of what South Africa has done in terms of protecting the rights of children.
Yeah, no, thanks so much. I mean, first of all, just to say it's a very important process, let's say, that the government's been going through in terms of sort of reporting back on the Convention on the Rights of the Child. And it really opens up what we hope is a very constructive dialogue, with UN, with civil society, with other partners in the country who are able to feed into those reports, to feed in both the progress and the successes, but also then highlighting some of the concerns and really putting the best interests of the child at the heart, let's say. So what we've seen is we have seen progress. We see policies that are in place. For example, we now have the South African Sign Language as a 12th official language. We have policies there that also need to be enacted. We've seen infant mortality, for example, under 5 child mortality rates decline massively over the last 2 decades. So there has been some solid progress there. We've seen birth registration rates go up. But the report also then points out where we need to really act, where we need to improve child rights, protection of child rights and child well-being more broadly, which is absolutely critical now as we look forward from the report.
And looking at the progress being done here, what would you say it means in terms of the protection of children in South Africa that we didn't have before?
Yeah, I mean, I think first of all, it's absolutely critical that we have the policies and the acts in place that essentially put that protection of children at the top level. Let's say it's absolutely critical that children are seen, as the concluding observations state, a national priority. Especially in times like today when we're seeing issues with inflation, we're seeing a rise in living costs. It's absolutely essential that children are always put at the heart of government policies and acts, but also that we then can implement those, of course. And that requires commitment to budgeting, a commitment to what we call sort of child-friendly budgeting, let's say. And that's absolutely critical to avoid budget cuts, to avoid the impact of inflation and other issues that might impact on budgets that support children, across social services, across the education sector and many others as well. And that's what we're also calling for. And that's what the concluding observations also point out and note, the importance of protecting those budgets to ensure services are there for children wherever they live in the country.
And of course, we will be hearing from the Minister of Finance next week when he delivers that budget. What would you like to see as UNICEF South Africa, especially when we're in a very difficult time in the country, when we've heard that, there may be budget constraints in some departments?
Yeah, it is a challenging time, and what we'd like to see is that everyone, not just government, but many other partners that UNICEF and others work with, put children at the centre. Everything we do, we look at how does this impact on children? What is the best interests of every child? And that means really committing to resources for example, to programming, protection programming that we support, the RECIHA program, for example, with Department of Social Development, making sure that local partners on the ground can provide services to some of the most vulnerable children in their communities, making sure that we can prevent violence. We can provide protection services as quick as possible to children who are at risk. But that really requires a commitment. That requires budgets to reach children where they are, wherever they are. And that's really what we're calling for. It's essential that we keep children at the heart of the priorities. We keep the budgets going to child-friendly services, let's say, and we'll keep advocating for that and working with government, working with civil society and many others to push that through.
And while the laws are there in South Africa, and you've mentioned, of course, in terms of trying to protect the rights of children, but one cannot shy away and talk about the problems being faced by children in our society, even though they are being protected by the law. What is your take when it comes to, children's lives being placed at risk? I mean, when you look at the crime statistics in this country, and here and there, we always see some sort of report coming out of either a child who's gone missing, a child, unfortunately, who's been found dead. What do you make of the struggles that we still continue to see in this country when it comes to children, even though that the laws are there to protect children?
Yeah, you're right. I mean, the struggles are well known, and let me firstly say that it's a positive that it's out there, that we're talking about these issues. The violence issues are massive. We see the statistics that the police put out every quarter, and they're horrific. And we see 3 children on average are murdered a day, which is 3 children too many. I mean, these are horrific numbers. And so the report also points out all the issues that are there that are very much out there in the forefront, that UNICEF, that many others are working on to try and tackle. There's also the issue of, let's say, parenting. The report talks a lot about parenting. How can we support parents or caregivers to provide the best support possible for their own children, not putting the burden on them, but working with parents, working with caregivers to improve the lives of children from the start. Really, that to get the best start in life, as we say, is absolutely vital, because that in turn can solve so many problems further down the line, from mental well-being, from violence issues, from helping to sort of break that cycle of violence that we're seeing continuing right now throughout the life cycle.
And we've heard from the South African government who has called on early childhood development for children to start schools quite early. And one would say that the introduction of a law like that is quite important for a country like ours. Like you're saying, when it comes to the protection of children, as well as the role that parents can play. What do you think needs to be prioritized more, especially in the protection of children's rights, and especially in ensuring that they have a bright future?
Yeah, I mean, early childhood development is absolutely vital, because we know, scientifically, the brain develops so fast in those early years of life, and that's why we promote early childhood development. But we also promote, for example, the power of play. So making sure parents have the resources or the know-how to engage with their children from a very young age and provide that nurturing care, that environment where children can thrive, let's say. And that is absolutely critical, because like I mentioned, it can actually have a knock-on effect throughout a child's life. It can provide that sort of mental well-being for a child throughout their life course. It can provide the access to education from a young age, from which a child can really build on and keep developing throughout their sort of educational journey, let's say. And in turn, then that has economic impact in terms of finding work, really then providing for the family. So it's really about that sort of life cycle and the childhood cycle, which is really why it starts at early childhood development. And that's why, we work with the Department of Basic Education, many others. We work with the Lego Foundation on these issues, and we'll keep doing that. There's a national conference on early childhood development coming up, and it's an absolutely critical part of a child's life to get that best start in life.
All right, Toby, thank you so much for your time this evening. That is Toby Fricker. He is UNICEF South Africa's Chief of Communications, just talking to us there about preserving the rights of children and the strides being made by the South African government.